So today we're going to be talking about winning with metrics, how to track and show the value of your program. If you missed getting the slides a second ago, feel free to reach out to me or one of the organizers, and we'll be happy to send you over the link as well. So a little bit about me. I just moved to Australia, where I actually lead Globally, which is a pilot social enterprise through Accessible Community, where we're creating an accessible development boot camp that's going to be made available for free for low-income folks with disabilities in the Global South. I also run Empower Accessibility, which is an accessibility consultancy that delivers audits, accessibility coaching, strategy, as well as training. And I serve on the W3C's ARIA and accessibility guidelines working groups. So this presentation is a resource. Feel free to use any of the content provided. In fact, if it helps you sell accessibility, you could just take my name out and slap yours right on there. My whole thing is if you create a good accessibility program at the end of the day, that, you know, that's a job well done then for me. That made this whole presentation worth it. So today we're going to be talking about metrics, program metrics, initiative-specific metrics, just the kinds of data that'll help you make a case for an accessibility program. So about metrics. What are metrics? Metrics are data that allow you to track progress for your initiatives. So how do they differ from KPIs, OKRs? Key performance indicators, or KPIs, and metrics both track performance, but KPIs are more focused on the goals of your initiative, while metrics are the actual data points. Metrics often inform KPIs, and OKRs refer to objectives and key results. Key results show how you meet an objective. And these are also measured by your metrics. So in case you were wondering what all of that alphabet soup ever meant, you have it now. So what are the differences? KPIs and key results in OKRs track how you're meeting goals, and metrics provide the proof that you're actually doing that. The big difference between OKRs and KPIs is that KPIs describe the results and OKRs describe a desired future state. And you have different flavors of metrics as well. Operational metrics look at the productivity, efficiency, and effectiveness of processes. Customer metrics are about how your products and services meet the needs of your customer. And product messages show how your products and services are performing. And the reason why it's important to know these differences and such is because your leaders are going to need you to show value in your program. You're going to need to make a case for accessibility, and making a data-informed case can help you really kind of move the needle at your organization. And so being able to tie back different strategies and goals to improvements in operational metrics, customer metrics, and product metrics will allow you to speak the same language as your leadership, because that's what they're looking for. At the end of the day, there's a lot of things businesses can do, and a lot of initiatives they can invest in. But if you actually show how investing in your initiative will help move the needle in other ways that meet business priorities, you can sort of really make a much stronger case for your program, and also show the value of your program once you do get funding. So in order to be effective, you're going to have to learn how your organization is collecting the data and the factors that they're measuring to generate these metrics. So you'll have to actually create, you'll have to go through and talk across your organization and understand how people are measuring different factors, whether that's customer data from your customer service divisions, or whether that's getting data from your project managers and such, or even just using something like Microsoft Clarity to get metrics on how folks are using your site, for instance. Have teams loop you in so that you can get updates on the things that your organization is tracking. So one way to do this that's pretty effective is any organization that runs like a tool like the intranet in your organization such, they actually have data about who's visiting those sites and how folks are actually which sites they're going to and such. You can actually get monthly reports of that kind of data. Customer service data, you can actually get that from your call centers or your brick and mortar stores. Efficiency data, you can actually get that from your tools like Jira, Workfront, Azure DevOps, if that's what you use. So just inventory your sources of data, and that will help you get a sense of what kinds of data you can track and how to get that regularly. Over time, you can add accessibility to the mix and measure the impact of accessibility metrics on the overall metrics your business is measuring. So essentially, after an audit, how quickly are tickets getting actioned on? And is there any sort of movement in any of the other metrics that you're tracking? To show the value of your program, you'll need to show how it's impacting your business and demonstrate the return on investment. You'll also need to be methodical in your approach and have your assumptions and hypotheses ready. And sometimes you might be wrong when you look at the data, and that's perfectly fine. Just change your approach later and use metrics to fine-tune your program. So essentially, come in and figure out, inventory all of the different kinds of data your organization is collecting and other sources of data that they might not be collecting that come to you. So there was this it's a conference presentation I still remember, probably 10 years later, and somebody had actually used XAPI to track business value of training. XAPI is a specification to track, really rich learner data. And this person actually connected it to a lot of different value metrics and even the behavior of folks on their computers, because they had computer tracking software in all their machines. And so they were very easily able to show how folks were more able to do their jobs after taking training. And so if you can get data that's rich, where folks are, where you're actually tracking things like how fast it takes for tickets to get into accessibility tickets to get into your backlog, how quickly those get action, and once that code is pushed, how customer metrics might change, or whether or not help tickets go down. You can actually use that to your advantage. Also, you can track metrics on spend and such to show that your operations are more efficient as you implement different approaches, such as embedding accessibility engineers. And so this is where you need to actually be methodical, not only in how you're tracking data, inventory that first, but then also tracking as you're launching each initiative, tracking the metrics that you think it should affect, and seeing if your hypothesis is correct. For instance, if you embed an accessibility engineer, you should, if you have a good accessibility engineer, they should be preventing around 80% of the issues. And then you can track that over time and, do an initial audit to get a baseline, then embed the accessibility engineer and over time track the average number of issues per component and see you should be seeing a downward trend at that point. Um, so how are metrics different than statistics? Statistics are more collected to measure trends and patterns or insights, while metrics are used to measure performance. So you might hear both. Statistics are kind of out there in the wild to kind of measure certain types of population trends or impacts and such. Metrics are things that are smaller, they're used for your organization to measure performance against objectives. They're related but not the same. So how you would use statistics is you would use them to help inform your assumptions and hypotheses, for example. And that can help you collect good data and set realistic KPIs. So KPIs are your goals, the things that you want your metrics to kind of show that you're doing. Statistics are things that help inform your goals, and hypotheses are what you think will happen when you make a particular intervention. So metrics should be used to show performance of KPIs and OKRs. So it depends on what your organization uses, what framework, but basically progress towards goals. And you're showing how your efforts create value in dollars and cents if you can. Um, and your report should be different at different levels of leadership. For instance, your direct manager would probably want something more rich and more about the team's performance, while your executives would want something that's more higher level, but about how the business is performing and how specifically your impact is, creating an ROI. So showing how the value of every dollar they're spending on accessibility. Assumptions are an important part of gathering metrics because they help you create hypotheses. They also help you narrow what you should test and verify. So understanding your assumptions can help you identify and get ahead of your own biases that can influence how you collect data. So essentially, getting good statistics, doing your research and such, and understanding how things are supposed to impact, your business metrics can, just help you get better data. So, for instance, I think that every dollar invested in accessibility is going to generate this much ROI. And my number, because I'm very bought into accessibility, might be higher than the actual number, for instance. So we need to make sure that what we're getting is accurate above all else. And that way that builds credibility and trust with your leaders so that they actually believe you when you start proving the value of your program. Hypotheses are testable predictions based on your assumptions. They focus your data on what matters, and they also help you frame your analyses. So if you assign an accessibility engineer to a development team, you should be able to lower time to market by 20%, let's say. So that's what you think will happen when you embed an accessibility engineer. And now you can kind of do some research to see if that's plausible. If that's plausible, and then make some KPIs around that, and then measure that as folks kind of and then kind of measure that as you go along to see if that that intervention actually did work that way, or if there were other benefits that you didn't realize that intervention had brought. And you're going to need different metrics for different initiatives. So you'll need program metrics, you'll need training metrics. As I mentioned earlier, XAPI is a really excellent specification for that. And now it's just it's not just the new SCORM, it's really its own set of data. Awareness initiatives are going to have things like email open rates and such that you'll want to track. Vendor monitoring, basically time it takes for vendors to become compliant, numbers of issues per vendors whose VPATs have been found to be inaccurate, vendors with accessibility clauses and such, accessibility engineering, average issues per component, basically time remediation time, and then of course, different measures to track maturity and such, and how often an accessibility engineer is used when creating new components, things like that. Then audits, that's pretty straightforward. It's number of issues and then those issues over time it takes to get those issues in the backlog and such. Automation, and just another thing about engineering, their whole job is prevention. Audit's job is about, finding and fixing the issues after. So accessibility engineering is a lot less expensive of an intervention. So generally what you would do is you would track how much it's costing you to prevent issues and then track average issues per component to show the value of that program. And then audit, is how quickly you get things remediated. Because the thing is, if you kind of sit on issues, the problem is that your platform is going to change by the time you actually remediate them. And that's what happens to a lot of organizations. So not only is it expensive, not only is it but there is a time, there's a clock basically the second you do an audit to actually fix everything. And then the thing is you have a clock, a countdown clock to when you have to go through that same process over and over again. It's, basically any time you retrofit something, it's a sunk cost. Because there's just going to be, you're going to have to do it all over again in another year or two. Automation is also a shift left technique. So prevention is a good portion of that. Also, you have monitoring and such. Looking for regressions is a really good use case, probably the best use case for automation right now. Customer service, basically tracking, once you get rich customer data, you can actually start seeing how different accessibility initiatives and accessible platforms affect customer service. So whether or not folks are creating more or less or fewer tickets, if there's, you can actually look at your organization's reputation statistics online and see how the reputation is tracking based on a number of different factors. See if your ratings go up on different, rating sites like Trustpilot and such. And then employee inclusion, basically taking a look at, whether or not people are submitting tickets and such for different issues, what time it takes for them to get access to assistive technologies, overall employee happiness scores and such. So, you can get a good set of data there as well. And then also track employee performance over time, because when you actually create an inclusive environment, it helps employees perform their jobs and it creates a better workplace overall. And then you'll find when you're gathering data, other metrics too that will be useful. So when you report up to your direct leadership, tie your metrics, especially if you can't set the KPIs and OKRs yourself, tie the metrics that you're gathering and the different ways your program is impacting those metrics to the KPIs of your team. So if your business is really concerned about time to market, show how your program is actually reducing time to market. So for example, if you developed a process and the goal was to get 15% or more of that organization to use the process, report how that KPI is on track. The metrics to your direct manager will most likely be much more granular than metrics as you report to senior leadership. Senior leadership wants to tie metrics to overall strategy. So you have to tie it to the business strategy. And so you'll have to show you how your program is either saving your organization money, reducing time to market, increasing customer satisfaction, driving profit. So focus on the big picture and always be succinct. I think a lot of people, when they start talking to senior leadership in the beginning, they're a bit too wordy. I'm guilty of that as well. And the thing is, leadership just wants succinct data. They want somebody who's credible making that case, and they want you to come in with a solution to problems. So if you're ever talking to senior leadership, never, ever, ever bring in a problem without a detailed solution, because you'll want to build credibility that you can fix that problem. And if you don't feel comfortable as the person who can fix that problem, go in with the person who can, because there's nothing worse than coming in with a problem without having a solution to your senior leaders. So now let's get to how you win and how you tell a story with data. So create different stories based on your assumptions and hypotheses. So for example, moving auditing in-house will save your organization X amount per year. This is a very good way to save your organization money because paying for auditing is much, much more costly than having in-house auditors. And you can find there's so much good talent out in the market right now. Folks that have engineering backgrounds, who are good at accessibility, who can do audits very well and really help your devs fix things. Also, it allows your organizations to increase audit capacity because outside vendors often don't have, aren't able to, especially if you're a large organization, outside vendors often won't be able to handle the amount of work you have, even if you pay them time and materials. It's just, organizations can only scale so quickly, and your organization can actually adapt your program to meet your demand. So also ask around about the kinds of metrics others are reporting up and what has worked and not worked with other teams. So let's talk about program metrics. Program metrics include things like budget and spend. So if you don't have a budget, learn who's paying for accessibility services and what they're spending. Do an audit and figure out all the spending, accessibility spending in your organization. And then complete an accessibility budget for your company. So basically, that's how you can kind of show ways to control costs as once you get that number. Then you show how your programs and strategies will reduce that spend and increase effectiveness and efficiency. And when you get a budget, show your leadership the business value they're getting from that budget. So every dollar that you spend has to actually, improve metrics in things that matter to your leaders. So then you have conformance metrics. So this is, a tricky thing because a lot of interventions, especially if you have a reactive program, the work that you're doing in accessibility often gets wasted because essentially you're on a cycle. You're just doing an audit fix remediation cycle, and it's an endless loop that costs your organization lots of money, but actually doesn't increase um, actual conformance, because by the time they fix everything, the platform will have changed and you'll have to do that process over and over again. And they're not developing processes that will actually prevent issues. So they're spending so much money to retrofit each version of their platform. And that's just probably one of the most ineffective ways to run an accessibility program. So that's where you can kind of make the case that that actually moving things left, embedding accessibility engineers with engineering backgrounds into your development teams can really move the needle there and save your organization costs. Uh, so conformance metrics tell your leadership how conformant different experiences are. So compliance with WCAG, violations found by manual or automated testing, status of remediation, average time findings stay in the backlog, trends over time, and sources would be things like manual audits, automated tools, bug tracking tools, and ask me later about automation, because there's some cool things you can do now. It's still not going to find nearly the amount of issues you need to find, and it's not, and a lot of those issues are going to be false positives, but you can create a pretty good ecosystem still, and get some value for it, especially when it comes to things like regressions. That's probably the best use case for automation. And then custom dashboards. So you have to you can work with your data and engineering teams to see how they can help you build integrations between different tools. And, there's a growing number of organizations that are getting data science folks embedded, and you can kind of work with those folks to create dashboards. And I did this at Navy Federal. I actually had a lot of folks just kind of volunteer for things like this. And folks were more than happy to, because it showed proofs of concept. It really kind of helped them make cases for their teams. And it helped the organization mature in terms of, getting more mature processes to actually create data for and more accurate data for leadership. So folks are often more than happy to kind of help with things like that. So usability statistics are a great way to kind of help you get different hypotheses together to kind of help you build KPIs and kind of help you see places where metrics could make a difference. So going out there and doing your research on trends and statistics can kind of help you figure out which interventions to try first, and what the impact of those should be. So for instance, 69% of disabled customers will leave a website that's hard to use due to inaccessibility. So their research on AbilityNet found that. So my thought would be is if we have a process that's really good, that makes a website more usable, I'm going to see what the current state of my accessibility is, and then I'm going to work on interventions that make that website more accessible. And then I'm going to actually track using Microsoft Clarity or something, where users are getting stuck, and whether or not they're, before and after, and whether or not that those accessibility efforts are making a difference. And 83% of users with access needs stick to companies they know provide accessible websites, with 86% having paid more for a product from an accessible site than buying it from an inaccessible competitor. And so this is where I would look at, customer satisfaction scores and sales data and such before you start the interventions, to get a baseline, and then kind of track it over time to see how your interventions are actually impacting those numbers, and whether customers are staying put more often, or if you're getting increased sales even. Because people with disabilities and their families represents a $13 trillion market. And it's bin analyzer exclusion actually costs countries between 2 and 7% of their GDP each year. So that's potentially a lot of potential customers, also a lot of customers that are in the market, currently that you can kind of probably access if you um, do accessibility the right way. And making content accessible yields broader usage and engagement. A media company that added captions and transcripts for accessibility saw unique visitors increase by 4.2%. And inbound links jumped 89%. So with things like improved search visibility, accessible code is just good code. So actually, another set of metrics you can track is any organization that says they want to automate away all their staff and want to use AI to, lower costs of doing business. No organization is serious about that unless they make their applications accessible, because accessible code is just good code. And it's actually specifically designed to be read by machines. So if you have an accessible website, for instance, it's much easier for AI to, go through that site. It's much easier for you to automate it because the code's much cleaner. And so you really can't be serious about automation, about AI, about security even without having an accessible site. And so not only does it help with improved search visibility, it helps improve performance with AI tools, with automation. There are a lot of different benefits, and this is where statistics can really help you drive those different, how you're going to track those different initiatives and the value of those. So getting usability metrics, you get those from usability studies, customer feedback, surveys, A/B testing. So things that show kind of how people are using your tools, log analysis. So looking at errors, crashes, unexpected user interactions, task abandonment points. As I mentioned earlier, Microsoft Clarity, which is 100% free. And other heat mapping tools can help you get this data. They also give you someone was actually mentioning that they when they implemented this, it actually shows who's doing clicks versus keyboard actions, which can kind of help you take a look on how your folks are engaging with your sites. You could do session recording through tools like Hotjar to kind of see live how somebody's interacting with your tools. And then Google Analytics also has a lot of robust data. A/B testing is really good if you are unsure, if you have two accessible approaches for how to build a component, but you want to see which one is a better fit for your customers. A/B testing is a great way to do that. So these are all great methods for getting metrics, but also kind of just tracking trends over time. And you're going to run into roadblocks where your organization doesn't even see the need for an accessibility program. So I wouldn't say what if, you're definitely going to run into that, especially nowadays when folks are looking to cut costs. Usually businesses will want to keep the status quo because they don't see a compelling reason for making an investment in the accessibility program, in an accessibility program. And the thing is, you can't just tell them, well, it's the law, because in the US right now, the law's not super likely to get, all that well enforced. There's in Europe, it's still unclear how much each country is going to go after folks that aren't creating accessible products. And businesses at this point in a lot of jurisdictions are just sort of willing to take the risk, because even if they did receive a demand letter, sometimes it only costs like $20,000 to make it go away, even though you can factor in, and they don't factor this in a lot, um, costs for things like, outside counsel and such, which do raise the cost considerably. They would want to prevent that if possible, but the likelihood of them getting sued, um, or for them to receive demand letter is low enough to where they don't see that as big of a threat as something like cybersecurity, for instance. So, that this is why the law is not going to be your best argument. And a compelling reason is showing how they're losing money now, going the route that they're going. So show how the current approach doesn't reduce risk, is more inefficient, and just costs more. If they want to spend money for no reason, sure, keep the current approach. But if they actually want to do business the right way, and just be good business people, they should actually implement an accessibility program. And so this is where you have to show how each part of your accessibility program will drive business value, and really tie that to concrete numbers. And so what is business value? That's things like financial value. Does this make or save us money? Customer value. Are customers happy or more loyal because of this? Operational value. Is it scalable or more efficient? Strategic value. Does this allow us to enter new markets, gain a market advantage, or manage risks? Employee value, does this increase employee retention or improve engagement? Because the thing is, anytime your organization has to, change employees and such, they lose, there's considerable costs associated with that. So employee loyalty is also important. So here's what you need to prove: that running an accessibility program will prevent issues, that preventing issues reduces costs and time to market, that a program is more effective at reducing risk than being reactive, and an internal team will be, because it will be less costly than hiring an outside vendor, because you don't have that separate overhead you're paying for. And accessibility improves UX and will help you gain a competitive advantage in the market. An example of this was Google just a few years ago had a Super Bowl ad. It was the most amazing Super Bowl ad. But it was about a feature, an accessibility feature, that automatically took photos for folks, kind of detected where they were, to help folks who were low vision use their cameras and take selfies and such. And you kind of follow this person through their life and getting married and such. And then the scene cuts to like a hospital. And, you're like, oh my gosh, did this person die? Because you're so invested in their life. And it actually turns out that they were in the hospital with their partner and they were having their first kid. So that just stuck with me, like effective marketing and such. So it can help you become a real competitor to the market as well. And so here's the thing. This is the choice you need to present to leaders to make it, to help that drive home why this is important. Aside from all the other great use cases out there, accessibility, they're not going to say that they don't do accessibility. So first you ask them, do you do accessibility? Nobody's going to say no to that question. And then you give them the choice. You can do accessibility the expensive way, or you can do it the cheap way, the cheap and effective way. Have your leaders make that choice. And no leader who is, interested in having a business that performs well will say they're going to want to do it the expensive way. That's just, if you can make a compelling case showing how accessibility is actually cheaper when it's done better and it's more efficient, they're going to go with that option because they're business people. So initiative-specific metrics, I'm going to go a bit quickly here, just because we're getting to the end of our time, and I want to give time for questions, but you do have all these slides. So prevention is powerful. Anytime you prevent an accessibility issue, you're saving accessibility engineer time for finding and writing the issue. I hate writing issues. I do audits. It's just not my favorite thing in the world. Product owner time because they don't need to manage that ticket. Scrum Master time for managing the issue and refinement in sprint planning. Developer time working on the issue, reporting it in stand-up, doing pull requests. QA time testing the ticket. Manager time managing the entire process. Also opportunity cost, because anytime that your folks are fixing an issue, they don't have time working on the cool new features that your business wants to release. And so these costs increase the longer the finding is in the backlog, because that same issue may be looked at multiple times by different stakeholders. So you're just burning costs. And that all adds up. So depending on your organization, this could be thousands of dollars per issue. I think in that calculator, I have a conservative 2480 cost associated with per issue. But you can use that remediation calculator in the link on the slide to kind of figure out how you could find that cost for your organization. And then how you show business value of your awareness. Internal awareness efforts support all of your other program pillars, and business value can be found in how it drives those pillars. External awareness efforts elevate your brand, engage your customers, and can help you gain a competitive advantage. So sources for awareness metrics include like web page or intranet views, the open rate for email, impressions and engagements, if you're talking about social media, event attendance, business changes and business reputation scores. There are a lot of different sites that track that for you. And then participation rates for things like champions programs, which everybody should have. So then tracking the business value for training. Training reduces context switching, which saves employees time because they're taking less time to research how to make something accessible. Also helps shift accessibility left. So a decrease in accessibility issues should be able to be measured post-training, builds capacity to remediate issues when they arise. And it's probably one of the more tough things to measure, but definitely is measurable. The thing I will say about training, though, is it does not scale. If you think you're going to train away the need for an accessibility engineer, that is not going to be the case. It takes, if you were to make this somebody's full-time, learning about accessibility somebody's full-time job, it'll probably take them around a year and a half to probably get good enough to start preventing issues, because there's just so much that goes into accessibility. You have to kind of build up their coding skills. It is its own profession. And so if folks are going to tell you that training is going to make everybody aware of accessibility, and they're going to do it all as part of their jobs, and you won't need a separate accessibility team, that is not true. Don't believe that. Sources for training metrics. Pre and post assessments, attendees and completion rates, results of periodic quizzes, average number of findings per component pre and post training, numbers and types of questions being raised to the accessibility team pre and post training, changes in average time to close tickets and manager feedback. And then vendor monitoring. Aside from reducing risk, vendor monitoring programs can shift some of the accessibility costs to your vendors. So your vendors are warranting often that they are providing you an accessible platform, but if they're not, they ought to be fixing it, and they ought to be fixing it quickly and for free. So you should never have to pay for a vendor to fix accessibility issues. Working with procurement and businesses early in the contract lifecycle can give your organization leverage to help negotiate more favorable terms and costs. So it's really, and so it is really strategic and very important to, understand what levers you have and to employ those effectively, and have an escalation path for if things aren't going the way they need to go to reduce your organization's risk. A lot of people just say, well, it's a third party, we don't control the code, we can't do anything. That is not true. You have a lot of power in a vendor situation. So cost to shift It include things like accessibility auditing, so they should be paying for that, re-audits and costs associated with remediation, because often they're saying that their platform's accessible, and if they find it's not accessible, then they should be fixing that. Sources include audit reports, remediation roadmaps, average time to remediate issues, re-audit results, time spent by your accessibility team working with the vendor, and risk score changes over time. Anytime that your accessibility team is spending doing anything is time that the money your organization's losing. So that's where, you'll want to try to control those costs as much as possible. So business value for automation. Automation is really scalable. It's great for finding regressions, which allows teams to target efforts and find root causes for accessibility issues. It can make accessibility remediation more efficient as well, especially with those tools that kind of help pinpoint and help folks kind of fix issues. It can help you find issues before they go to production. They can help developers find and fix issues in real time, especially if you employ accessibility unit testing and such. And so while automation is useful, the technology isn't reliable. And no matter what anybody says, the technology, you can embed all of the AI, it can be the smartest AI, it is not going to get you anywhere near conformance. And so it is useful, it is scalable, it is something to invest in, but it's not going to replace manual folks anytime soon. So sources for automation metrics are often built, into tools like crawlers, page level checkers, audit tools, platforms. APIs can be used to link these different tools, and findings can be delivered easily into reports or integrated into dashboards. Tool utilization rates should also be measured, because if folks aren't using the tool, it's not very helpful. And you can get better data if you're able to build integrations, and humans still need to be involved in the process, because there's a lot of false positives, no matter how much people say there are not false positives. Accessibility engineering, this is one of the things that can be most beneficial to your program. If you leverage accessibility engineers appropriately, you can see incredible cost savings, as you can have as much of as a 99 time return on investment. If you hire an accessibility engineer, I have a calculator, or I have an ROI sheet there as well that you can take a look at. It's important to find, if you're going to get an accessibility engineer, it's important to hire developers who are also accessibility professionals. These folks do need to know how to code. And this is a rare skill set to actually find in the space. But this is how you get maximum ROI. And accessibility engineering, again, is one of the most effective measures you can implement. To get an accurate ROI, you're going to need to measure average issue rate and remediation time per page before you hire the accessibility engineer. After hiring the accessibility engineer, how those change. And once you show the value of adding one engineer, it'll be easy to make the case for more. And make sure you train your accessibility engineer and your development teams on ways you can best integrate accessibility engineers into your development process. Coaches and coaching programs go a long way in doing that. And an audit, so I'm just going to skip through. I think we have a few more slides. I'm just going to skip through these, because I know that we've got quite a few questions in the queue, but you have all these slides. Audit's pretty straightforward. You have customer service metrics. I have some places where you can get those. Disability inclusion metrics as well. And then obviously other kinds of metrics you can track. So let's go to wrapping up. So final tips and takeaways. Building relationships is key to getting the data that you need. So be sure to talk to folks around your organization, understand how they work, and understand how they track how they are meeting their KPIs. Do research and have statistics to inform your assumptions. Write out your assumptions and hypotheses and use those to create KPIs and OKRs that you can use metrics to measure. Collect as much data as possible. Build yourself a data ecosystem if you can. You know, build integrations between tools as much as possible. Inventory all the ways, all the different data your organization is creating and figure out ways to collect that data and show that relation to business value drivers and create tailored regular reports to different levels of leadership. And so here's my information. If you want to reach me, my email is juanita@empoweraccessibility.com and my LinkedIn is https://www.linkedin.com/n/JAUNITAFLESSAS. And it's also within within the presentation, the PDF presentation as well. Now we have a few minutes for questions before the conference is finished, and I just want to give you all a bit of time to ask those questions. Sorry it took me so long. There's quite a bit of here, so.
No, no, it was great. It was fantastic. And I'll kind of go through and get through at least some of the questions in the time that we have left. So the first one, I'm going strictly by upvotes. So if you want to upvote questions that are already there, folks, this is the time. The first one is one value that accessibility brings to an organization is reduction of risk. Besides the absence of legal action, have you seen any effective metrics to capture the value of that risk mitigation?
So it depends what kind of risk you're talking about. So legal risk is a big risk. If your risk is losing customers, then you track customer data. If your risk is, risk of regulatory action, you can kind of look, usually regulators kind of tell you who they're going after. Risk of data breaches, you can actually tie accessibility to things like fraud, like financial fraud numbers. You can tie it to security incidents, folks having compromised accounts, because if you have an inaccessible login process, people are going to give their credentials to somebody else. And there's no such thing as a trusted person. So you'll have to see what those risks are, and then try to tie accessibility to those.
Yeah, thanks. No, and it's kind of tricky to quantify. Like the legal risk, I think, was the specific context, but that can be tricky, and it is based on your market, right? I mean, if you're in the States at least, the landscape is different whether you're a public or private entity, although I think that might change. But yeah, it's not always entirely easy to find some of those. Next one is, as far as web accessibility, what do you think the best metrics are to show a web team's value, such as related to regular accessibility improvements using site improve accessibility training, etc.? Go on to state, I've used the site improve accessibility score, but not sure if there are better metrics to use.
The accessibility scores provided by these tools are not very helpful. Yes, you can track those issues over time, but I would get a baseline and see how many issues you're actually creating each time your organization releases a component. This is why design systems are really important, because they can kind of help you reduce all of that risk. And then you can kind of track that through automated and manual means, track the average number of issues, how those go down as you're putting different accessibility interventions in. So an intervention would be adding an accessibility engineer and training your folks how to use that person's time. Intervention could be doing training for your team. Then you also kind of want to embed folks. Your accessibility engineer should be doing pull requests. And, the number of pull requests that lead to, people preventing fixing issues before they go to QA could be an important thing to track. So really it's about understanding how your organization is doing right now to kind of get to understand how to get a baseline for how those things will actually affect your performance.
Yeah, that initial benchmark is really critical. And just you have to, you know, base everything from there. If you don't have a starting place, you can't really track progress. There's a lot of conversation in the chat about procurement since that came up, and one of the next questions does relate to that. The question is, what should we do if a vendor does want to charge for accessibility fixes? For example, a form vendor we use has a quote unquote accessibility compliance module that costs extra.
Well, if you're not building that into the contract, accessibility into the contract, and if the vendor refuses to make things accessible unless you purchase, something extra, then I would start looking at other options. And I would tell the vendor that, saying, I'm going to have to bring my business elsewhere. Usually, they're a lot more open to sort of discussing things when you start kind of making it clear that you will not accept an inaccessible product, or you will not pay more for accessibility. Accessibility should be the default. And that's the position your business should take. There are plenty of vendors that will be more willing to work with you. And no vendor is going to not work with you because you're asking them to do the right thing. And
Yeah,
if
and
they
that
do, they're not worthwhile.
the tricky part is when there's one vendor in a space, which does happen. Like we've been talking to higher education and other libraries because they're a bunch of them are public entities and they're trying to figure this out. And they've almost all said we have, one publisher for one journal that is needed for accreditation for a class. So there are those edge cases which are trickier. That accessibility compliance module, I just feel like that's I would yeah, that doesn't taste good to me, like having a separate but equal kind of thing. That seems a little bit even further than some of the things that we've commonly run into. We've got time for one more question. Um, how can you make good predictions in your hypothesis? Are there tools to help estimate ROI, et cetera?
Um, Well, the thing is, there aren't tools yet, not really that get the data that you need. You're going to have to build your own data ecosystem. And so you're gonna have to figure out what your organization's using, where you can get quantifiable data. So what sort of project management tools and such are available, what sorts of tools to track, customer satisfaction scores, reputation, brand reputation, all of that you're going to inventory. And, then see about seeing what you can do to integrate all of those together to kind of get yourself a good ecosystem of information. And that's really should be your first step, because once you have that, it makes it much easier to sort of track track things over time, but also understand how your interventions are, how they're working.